So we're here today to talk about what's happening in Washington and how we're not real excited about the coup that's happened. We have a fossil fuel coup that's happened in front of our very eyes, where the Koch brothers and their like are taking over the agencies in Washington. And we're here to say that we don't approve of that. We're against that, and we're going to tell the Senate that they have to stand up to the Trump White House and say this is not permissible. We're not going to allow this conflict, these giant corporations to come in and set us back years and years for all the work we've done on climate change. So we're going to have a few things this morning. We're going to have a few speakers talk about each of the cabinet deniers that have been nominated. We have someone from Senator Udall's office who's going to give us a little bit of insight of what Senator Udall is up to working to prevent this from happening. And then we're going to go on a march. And we're going to march up to Central with our signs and walk around the block and come on back and do some chanting and raise some hell.
About one of the worst ones, Rex Tillerson, his nominee for Secretary of State. And so Rex Tillerson is, until a couple days ago, was the CEO of ExxonMobil, one of the #1 funders of climate change denial in the entire world. You can go to a website called exxonsecrets.org and find the list of 69 different climate denial organizations that ExxonMobil has been funding since about 1998. In the 1980s, their own scientists at Exxon proved to themselves what was going to be happening with global warming as a result of Exxon continuing to dig up and extract and burn fossil fuels and to send that CO2 global warming gas into the atmosphere. And we are seeing the results with us today. ExxonMobil has spent over $31 million funding some of these organizations, and they are groups like the American Enterprise Institute, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, ALEC, the Heritage Foundation, the National Taxpayers Union, Freedom Works, Federalist Society, et cetera, et cetera. One of my favorites, or one of the worst on this group of horribles, is the Heartland Institute. So have anybody ever read an article in the newspaper or on the press about how wind turbines are bad for birds and they kill birds? Raise your hand or speak up if you've. So all of those stories you can trace back to the Heartland Institute funded by ExxonMobil. So that's how they do their work. $31 million in funding over the years for climate denial organizations. As a result of that, Exxon is under investigation by attorneys general in 22 different states for defrauding their investors and hiding and lying to them about the effects of climate change and what they themselves have been doing. Our attorney general here in New Mexico is part of that group, and kudos to Hector Balderas for doing that. So that's one of several reasons why the CEO of ExxonMobil cannot be our Secretary of State. Okay. Rex Tillerson, in addition to that, is absolutely unqualified to be Secretary of State. He's known nothing else but working in the oil industry for 41 years. That's the only job he's ever had. He knows how to cut deals with third world dictators to help extract the oil from their countries and to suppress the objections of their own people. Those are the kinds of deals that he knows how to cut, and he has been very effective in doing that. And he's been doing that with countries like Chad and Angola and Equatorial Guinea and Qatar and Yemen, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. And as Secretary of State, he's going to continue to represent the interests of Exxon over those of the United States, over those people who want us to support human rights and elected democracies around the country. He cares about none of that. What he knows about is oil, and those are the interests that he's going to represent.
Thank you.
Sure will. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to join you today. I got a message here from Senator Udall. I'll read that in just a moment. But Let me first just say I know this is just the first of many such rallies we're going to have over the coming 4 years. And we need to stick together not just as environmentalists and conservationists to fight back on climate change, to protect our environment, and save our special places in New Mexico and around the country. We also need to stand together as working people, protecting the Affordable Care Act, Medicare, our retirees, looking out for educational achievement in our unions as well. And so we need to form a big group and stand together on all of these issues. And with that, I'll turn to this note from Senator Udall. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. Global warming. Got some diesel fuel and oil coming by here. We'll just let them pass. All right. Global warming is one of the greatest threats to public health, our environment, the economy, and our national security. And New Mexico is right in the bullseye, as farmers and anyone else who relies on water and weather know all too well. Higher temperatures, wildfires, drought, early runoff, and floods. These are all evidence that climate change is happening here, and it is happening now. The science on whether climate change is happening and whether humans are a cause is settled. We need to stop debating whether climate change is real and instead work together to take urgent steps needed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But I worry that President-elect Trump doesn't see it that way. Initially acknowledging that climate change is an issue and later denying that humans have anything to do with it, he now seems to have landed on the side of those who stand to profit from continued pollution. By installing insiders with strong ties to major polluters at agencies charged with regulating those polluters, President-elect Trump is abandoning his campaign promise to drain the swamp of the special interest influence in Washington. And he's instead filling it with exactly the kind of special interest he promised to reject. The American people accept that the science is real, the facts can't be denied, and we need to take urgent action to stop the impacts from climate change from getting worse. I will do all I can in Congress to protect the Paris Treaty, the Clean Power Plan, EPA's ability to curb greenhouse gases, and EPA and BLM's rules to reduce methane emissions. Woo. Already, I've asked Rex Tillerson about his views on climate change, and I will ask others the same thing as they come to meet me before their confirmation hearings. Their responses on these topics will determine how I vote on their confirmation. At home in New Mexico, we must look to developing a climate change action plan for our state, curbing methane emissions, especially in the Four Corners area, and increasing our renewable energy resources. Working together, we can make progress. Thank you again for inviting me, and thank you for your work on behalf of our community, our nation, and the world. Sincerely, Tom Udall.
All right, guys, let me go ahead and repeat myself. So my name is Peaches Blackbird. I'm a president of Power Through Peace. We're a social and political environmental organization that spreads awareness about things that are happening both locally and nationally here in our communities. My organization just went up to Standing Rock in September. We were there for about a half a week. And stand with Standing Rock. One thing that we did learn up there was that a lot of Native Americans are afraid to speak out about what's happening in their communities. One biggest downfall to Native American communities is that we've grown up to know not to ask questions and not to push for things that we don't know about. Well, our generation's gonna be the first one to ask and to fight for what we have and what is ours.
Yes! Do it!
Both sides of my family have been through the Battle of Wounded Knee, the Trail of Tears, the Long Walk, and the Pueblo Revolt. So we have fought for things that were rightfully ours, and we're going to continue to fight. Representative Zink has a hard time of knowing where Native American communities stand. The biggest problem in Native American communities is that we don't know what's going on because no one ever educates people on what is happening in our communities, both locally. Can you hear me back there? Okay. Sorry. One big problem in Native American communities is that no one ever educates our masses on what's going on. We did recently put an end to the Pinon pipeline, but that was only one battle, and we had countless battles to come forward. One big thing that we gotta do as a mass is to educate people all around us. If we continue to educate Native Americans on issues that's both harming them in the long term, then they will be able to stand up and fight for what is theirs. There's been long accounts of poison, lead water in Jemez that has continued to poison and bring cancer to our elders in both Zia, Jemez, and Santa Ana. It is our chance right now to stand up and fight for what they know and to educate them more on health concerns, both long and short term. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
All right, who's worried? I'm worried. I'm here with my 5-month-old, and I think a lot of you have kids and grandkids and are real focused on what we're doing this for and why we're here today.
Yes.
So I want to add to what Peaches was saying about Congressman Ryan Zinke from Montana. You know, this is a major agency that a guy who hasn't even served 2 terms in Congress is being slated to lead. We're talking about 500 million of 640 million acres of public lands under the purview of the Department of the Interior. We're talking about our national parks, our wildlife refuges, some of our national monuments, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Bureau of Reclamation. So this is our public and national patrimony being put in charge of by a man who claims to be a conservationist Republican, who claims that he acts in the image of Teddy Roosevelt. And that might have been true for a couple of years. In fact, he has stood up against the sale of public lands and supports the Land and Water Conservation Fund. But what happened after he was not elected as Lieutenant Governor of Montana in 2012? Well, the young man took a hard turn right, and he changed his positions. He had written a letter to President Obama saying, "You've got to act on climate change." And just a couple of years later, said a totally different story. Said, "We don't need to be working on climate change, and in fact, I'm going to vote to defund research on climate change by the EPA." So he took a practical approach to his political career and said, "I'll stand up for whatever is convenient." And it turns out that in his last re-election bid, oil and gas companies funded his campaign to the tune of $160,000 in a small state like Montana. So that's something to worry about. He's also taken a vocal stand in favor of the Keystone XL pipeline at the same time that he's serving on the board of a company that specializes in energy pipeline technology. What a happy coincidence. Patty asks, can you say conflict of interest? Conflict of interest! Oh, we woke up the baby. I'm sorry, honey. Okay. Zinke also voted for the Sportsman Heritage Bill, which would allow dam building, logging, temporary roads in wilderness areas. That doesn't sound like a land protection legacy to me. Zinke recently hosted listening sessions on a draft bill that would remove the president's authority to designate national monuments. Well, guess who was the first president to use the authority of the Antiquities Act to create national monuments? When Zinke first ran for Congress in 2014, his big issue, according to him, was the approval of a silver and copper mine beneath the Cabinet Mountains Wilderness in southern Libby, Montana. Another example of putting our public lands at risk. Zinke has championed a bill to overturn Interior Secretary Sally Jewell's moratorium on coal leases on federal lands until we can figure out a fair royalties system. He opposed President Obama's administrative rules to improve environmental protections during hydraulic fracturing on public lands. And he even declared, God gave us fracking, and that's a good thing. That's a little something to worry about.